Why is this lying bastard lying to me? This is a question famously asked by master TV inquisitor Jeremy Paxman. It's a history of 30 years of British politics viewed through the prism of political television, from Thatcher's fall to the crash and burn of Liz Truss via the Iraq War, austerity, Brexit, and Partygate. Delighted to be joining me live on the line from somewhere in the UK, author of Why This Lying Bastard Lying to Me, Rob Burley. Good morning to you, Rob.
Hi, Giles. Hi, and hello to everyone out there in Spain, and also to my brother who's in Tenerife. I just want to quickly get that in. I'm in Hove in Sussex. He's in Tenerife. So hi, Phil.
Hove, actually, of course.
Yes, indeed. That's the one.
That's exactly. So this is a famous question asked by Jeremy Paxman. Is this not a very jaded way to look at our noble and long-serving politicians? Why is this lying bastard lying to me?
Yes, well, I mean, it was Jeremy Paxman, so of course it was jaded. That's his default mode. So, you know, he was actually quoting somebody else, from a journalist from back in the 20s, but this was something he said at the end of the 80s, and it is one particular view, and also it's just a good title for a book, right, Giles? So I wasn't going to pass that up. It's too good to miss. It's not necessarily though what I think, or necessarily what is it the book's theme, or the book. Sorry, the book isn't saying that, but certainly that is a theme of the book because people think that, and they've got a point probably. So, Jeremy, I think was articulating probably what people feel about politicians to quite a large extent. How
has the art of political interviewing changed with TV, with the TV? Because if you think back to, what should we think back to the 60s and the 70s, it was very much more sort of, they deferred. Politicians were seen as, the Wilsons, etc., were seen as people to be asked, not confrontational questions, but it was almost a stage, a platform for a political broadcast.
Well, actually, when it really changed, it started to change in 1958. So if you remember, you may not be old enough like I am, Sir Robin Day. It was, of course, an absolutely, you remember him. Listeners will remember what an amazing TV performer that guy was. And he invented this, right? So before he came along, it was at an airport, wearing a hat and a big coat. They'd be saying something like, so Prime Minister, is there anything you'd like to share with the country? And they say, well, I think it was awfully important to think about the jobs. Whatever it was. And they would say nothing. And there would be deference as you described. But when Robin came along, he decided over the course of the 50s and 60s, it really did develop into a less deferential relationship. And so that's when that started. And so it really developed into the 70s with shows like Weekend World that was on ITV back then with Brian Walden. And the questions got tougher and tougher. Robin Day did it. Jeremy Paxman did it. So, yeah, it sort of started in the 60s and it got progressively more difficult for the politician.
And if you read Sir Robin Day's autobiography, what Grand Inquisitor, I mean, he sets the scale for that. And who can forget, perhaps, the best known riling of a politician came from Sir Robin Day against John Nott.
Oh, yes. This is my, as a kid, this was like my favourite ever thing. And it shows how sort of sad I was because I was watching political TV. But, John Nott was the defence secretary, and he was a very unflappable character until Sir Robin Day flapped him, as it were. And he brought him into his studio. He asked him some impertinent questions in a hilarious way. I recount the whole thing in the book. He said, if I may say so, you are a here today, if I may say so, gone tomorrow politician. At which point he was gone today because he walked out of the studio. He threw his microphone across the desk at Sir Robin Day and left. And it was just a magic moment because you never saw that. You never saw real people, politicians as real people. He got cross and he got sick of it. And he was just grumpy and he wasn't happy about it. And off he went. So that really was a big moment. That was in 1982.
40 years ago. And it splashed across all the media because we hadn't seen anything like this before. What is wouldn't you say that these days, of course, we have politicians, but the art of the political interview is much trickier because we have politicians who don't get involved, but will double down or say, well, I may have done something incredibly wrong, but I'm now focusing on, the will of the British people, or we need to draw a line and move on. They're always focusing and they're always moving on and they're always avoiding the bleeding question.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that prompted me to write the book is that, I'm sure people listening to this will have shouted at their TVs and their radios, just answer the question because they're sick of it. It's not working. It really isn't working anymore, this. It doesn't work for the politician. It doesn't work for the voter. It doesn't work for anybody. They go in with pre-prepared answers. Rishi Sunak seems to have a script at the moment. He just uses in every interview, which is the same, irrespective of the question. Well, look, Giles, it's not new. It's been going on for decades and in different forms. And in a way, it feels less sophisticated now than it used to feel when the New Labour were doing it. You'll remember sort of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were quite good at not necessarily answering the question, or David Cameron even after them. But you didn't necessarily notice it quite so much because they were so skilled at it, because they were quite significant sort of talented politicians. Whereas you get to Liz Truss and, you know, you can see it in her eyes. She's not got what she needs to be at that level, and she's just resorting to pre-prepared lines, and it doesn't work.
I mean, the Truss case, as should we call it, those 44 magnificent days? But it was car crash. There's been some car crash moments, I think, in British political history, in British TV. But to see, you could literally see the cogs going round and almost the rabbit in the headlights with Liz Truss when she was broadsided by questions that weren't exactly sort of Paxman at his height, were they? They were pretty straight down the bat, but it seemed like, computer says no.
Absolutely. I mean, in a way, yeah, I think it was a new low, but in a way it was the culmination of everything we've seen for the last, 30 years. It culminates in Liz Truss, right? Someone who can't do the job, who avoided interviews so she wouldn't be scrutinised, and who in the end got tripped up by, as you say, interviews by local radio, very good local radio journalists in the BBC, and the reason it was effective was because it was one after the next, and she couldn't answer it. And so, why? This is why the book is fun. It's got lots of stories. It's got jokes. I hope, people are telling me it's a very enjoyable read. But if it has a message, it's that if we ended up with Liz Truss, then we're doing something wrong. Okay, we need to do it differently, and that means a different way of communicating, a different way of engaging.
And we'll come to the funny bit. I just want to get this one out of the way, because this has sort of struck me. Is the problem is, Rob, that with so many media outlets out there at the moment via various TV channels, social media, whereas back in the day it was BBC, ITV, it was the weekend world programs, news nights famously, where they could put politicians under make them squirm. Now the politicians can go off to another network that's perhaps more favourable to their liking, or their PR people say, well, we won't go with you because you ask us nasty questions. And that is a worrying for A, political debate, and B, by extension, democracy.
Absolutely. But this is what I mean when I talk about the Truss case, and also Boris Johnson, which was that by not doing that, by not going to the country and explaining, they failed. So it didn't help their cause in the end, because Liz Truss didn't make an argument to the country about these radical ideas she had. If she had, maybe people would have gone with it. Instead, she tried to do the bare minimum, go onto sympathetic media, do no media, whatever it might be. And she wasn't tested. And so she wasn't able to carry it through in power. Boris Johnson didn't last very long. He was in power for a very brief period. He avoided scrutiny. You will do better as a politician if you tell the country a story, you tell your voters a story, you explain what you believe, and you then try and implement what you're saying you're going to do. If you just talk to, GB News or whatever, then you're only going to preach to the converted. How
confrontational do you have to be as a political commentator or an interviewer? Because people say, oh, well, he's just like Paxman at the end. I mean, he was just going in for asking difficult questions for the sake of it. I mean, what would you say to that point of view?
It's valid, and it's a two-way street. At the moment, the politicians just aren't really participating. They'll do a 7-minute interview. That'll be it. So you can't do anything. But if we can go back to the world, or decide as a kind of people or a democracy, we want to go back to a world of proper scrutiny and conversation, it's a two-way street. Politicians can't be expected to engage with you if you just shout at them. But the thing is, they do it, Giles, they do it now. They shout now, interviewers, because they've only got 7 minutes. They want to get viral. They want to get something that's going to go on social media and catch fire. So they try and do something a little bit shocking or attention grabbing in a short interview rather than have a conversation. So it just reflects upon itself and magnifies itself in a negative way.
As a political interviewer, and I'm thinking of as well as people like Andrew Marr, of course, Paxman, who we mentioned before, and the brilliant Emily Maitlis. Do you ever think you should have like an association where you should all political journalists should meet round a bar somewhere and swap stories and just have a support group? Because again, why is this bastard lying to me? Surely, because it's kind of a no-win situation. Because if you ask brilliant questions and the politician riles up, then you get hit by one section, and if you're too soft on them, you get hit by the other. And obviously, because of what's been happening, should we say charitably recently with certain loans and whatever, the BBC is coming in for some flack as well, and certain journalists are going off to do their own thing.
Look, I mean, first of all, I think, don't worry, the journalists are meeting and drinking. That's definitely happening. There's no problem with that. So that goes on. But in terms of the rest of it, look, you'll always be accused of being, by different people will look through their own prism. If they like one politician, they'll see you interviewing another in a particular light, or they'll think you're being too harsh on the person they like or whatever it is. And the BBC obviously gets that in the neck all the time. My experience is that, journalists, TV journalists, radio journalists, they try their best, particularly the BBC, ITV, Sky, where I am currently, to be impartial. It's not always easy. You'll get criticism. You've got to take the brickbats. But look, the politicians need to take part. They need to do their bit, and we'll see if we can improve the relationship. At the moment, it's kind of a bit of an impasse.
Mm. So when you approached people like Andrew Marr, Andrew Neil, Emily Maitland, and said, "I'm doing a book about this," did they think they're great? Well, here's a couple of stories for you. Was this like I've got to tell you this one, Rob? This is a great one.
Yeah, these people have great stories and they like sharing them. I think most of them they're like, really, Rob? I'm a bit busy, but they took part. They're happy to. But I think also others like Andrew Neil's written a piece in, I don't know if viewers listeners can see that online now today about his experience of political interviewing in the Mail today. He loves talking about it. He talks about my book at length in that piece, and talks about his perspective, how he saw all those things. So I think people like him are very committed to this idea. It may be a forlorn hope, Giles, or maybe just shouting in the wind here, but we need to get back to longer interviews done seriously, done properly, and politicians stop being cowards and interviewers stop being showboaters, and we'll see if we can make some progress.
And who was your favourite, or that you think, when they said we've got so and so coming in, and you used to think they're going to be a great interview because because they're going to be controversial, or we can talk with this person, or they were just entertaining. Were there any politicians from the annals, as it were, that you used to look forward to, or you still look forward to interviewing?
I mean, of the current crop, the only one that really springs to mind is Michael Gove, because Michael Gove occasionally can't help himself but actually speak the truth, or speak or engage in the argument, and he just sometimes says things he probably shouldn't. He doesn't just do the lines in a very boring, repetitive way. So there was him. Otherwise, to be honest, it's people in power. I mean, I loved it when it was Tony Blair. I enjoyed it if it was David Cameron. Go back to John Major as well. John Major, who weirdly is, just so people know this, quite a charismatic guy when he isn't on telly, which is surprising. And then the host of others, down the years since then, Gordon Brown and George Osborne were big figures. I feel like I don't know that we have them. I mean, Johnson was a big figure, is a big figure, but maybe not in a good way.
What do you hope that people take and learn and can digest from "Why is this lying bastard lying to me"?
Well, I think they should. I hope they'll have a laugh and have fun, and they'll find it a page turner, which is what I'm hearing from people. But also at the same time, they will recognise that the media are there as a way for people's questions to get to politicians. People will demonize the media, but the media is really important to make sure those people are held to account. And we all need to basically expect our politicians and our media to do that job properly. And it's important. It really is. Look what's happened recently. It's not gone well. It's, we've had crash and burns. We shouldn't have that. We need stability. We need sort of grown up behavior. So look, that's the message. But look, it's done with a laugh. It's not supposed to be done in a really po-faced way. So I hope people enjoy it.
And let's leave them with a laugh, as they always say, Rob. What was the moment that you actually had to literally sort of stop corpsing or bite your bottom lip or turn the mic down? What was the one moment, or one of the moments that either you or one of your colleagues said, you've got this one was an absolute, I had to muffle the sound recordist.
Oh my God. The moment when Boris Johnson in the 2019 Tory leadership election, it's very complex. So the only thing you need to know is he liked to talk about paragraph 5B of a treaty because he knew about 5B. He had no idea what 5C was. So our plan, we knew he wouldn't have it. We didn't tell us that, but we knew he would never have an idea about what 5C was. So we asked about 5C, and he had to admit on air that he didn't know what he was talking about, which is a result. And it tells you something real. It's not just a gotcha moment. And I must say, I did suppress perhaps a giggle in the control room.
The book is called "Why is this lying bastard lying to me?" It is by Rob Burley, who's been today. Rob, we know where we can find you, obviously on Sky News. But is there social media? Is the website? Where can they go to find more about you and more about this book?
Okay, so if you want to follow me on Twitter, is the best way. It's at Rob Burl, ROBBURL. That's where I am on Twitter, and there's a link there to where you can go on all the different online sites and get hold of the book. Please give it a go. Like I say, it's serious but fun at the same time, which I think is a good thing.
Absolutely, absolutely indeed. And also going to be available as a virtual download from our own virtual bookstore. The book is called Why Is This Why Is This Lying Bastard Lying to Me? Yeah. Searching for the Truth on Political TV. It's by Rob Burley. Rob, I know you're busy, so thanks so much for sharing the time with me this morning.
I enjoyed it, Giles. Thanks very much. Take care, bye.